Live streaming is on.
Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fialka. It's March 12th, 2021. It's an honor and a pleasure to be with two really fine human beings. Clinton Ignatoff, the ultimate partner, is here. Thank you, Clinton, for facilitating and helping. And it's an honor and a pleasure to be here with Nile Southern. Nile, how you doing?
Good. Great to be here.
That was a quick answer. They didn't
that
know
that was a question. I'm sorry. I wasn't in my role yet as a respondee. How am I doing? I have a broken ankle, but you haven't heard that too often during interviews. It's raised at a sort of 45-degree angle. And other than that, everything is just, well, it's extraordinary to be here with you.
Thank you, Nile. What's the best thing for a human being?
I would say creative engagement.
Yeah, it's a great answer. And what's your favorite form of information? How information comes into you?
Wow. I think collage is really the best way for me to absorb and just like be to engage with information. But you know what I usually take it in with is a radio. Radio is really my favorite, and I'll just say that community radio is really a gift. And I've been in a city here in Boulder, Colorado, that kind of drew me to it from London. That was on my list of like, do we move to here or there? And this community radio station, which is all volunteer run, was a big part of it, because I used to get mixtapes in the mail from my friend Mark America of this radio station. Not mixtapes, just like recordings capturing what was over the airwaves. And I just thought, wow, it's feeding the soul on whether it's alternative radio or the music DJs bring in, they create their own shows, just really nurturing.
Love it. I am totally a radio person and a collage person. We are one of alike. And so why do you think humans collect or gather information?
I think they kind of want, I don't want to be quoting Bob Dobbs' son of Bob Dobbs' son, anyone named Bob Dobb, anything, but like this idea of wearing cultural clothing, kind of sticks to you. There are things that you resonate with, and there's just something about it. It's bewitching. So whether you're walking on the beach and what draws your attention, is it how it'll feel in your hand, or when you hold it up to the sky, something about it, and you just love to walk on the beach. There's the sound of the waves too. What's not to like? To sit down in it, let it coat your body. Similarly, it's harder to find things that I really resonate with in the normal landscape. But then again, what is it that draws the eye? Something that touches the heart, I think.
Well, you are a stellar wordsmith. Those were some great words. I want to wear some cultural clothing from your wardrobe. So do you think, Niall, this tendency or need to collect information is more innate or more invented by humans?
Well, no doubt it is innate, because we come from the natural world. But it's a great question, because, about keeping things around and collecting things, you'd really have to look into biology and into animal nature, and it'd be very interesting to see who we affiliate with. Peter Beard was a great collector of rocks. He would collect rocks, especially that looked like kidneys or potatoes, and he created a huge area. And I may have gotten it wrong. There may be meat or something like this. But of course, if you look at his journals, it's all about collecting I think I called it it's like cultural debris. There's something about it that's that's a very human thing to say, you know what, this has some meaning beyond what it really is, and in connection with something else, and maybe with a little smear of India ink over it, now it's fixed and, in parentheses, controlled, but it's created into an artistic, in a flow. So to create flow out of chaos, I mean, that's the kind of the goal, I think, with any creative person, and maybe any person anyway, is to create some order out of the chaos and make you feel good. You feel good about it, and suddenly it's not just a piece of cultural detritus. It's something found, preserved, and integrated into a vision that you can take in at one moment, and just gives you pleasure, and then you put it back wherever it was.
Yeah, that's beautiful. We can make up our own new myths. So now, do thoughts create emotions?
Yeah, I think they do. It's when I become emotional, it's usually a thought that's triggered some emotional piece of my heart that maybe I've forgotten was there. I'm still figuring out. I'll just say briefly that, and I don't need to say why I became emotional, but I was, as a young child, I was in therapy, art therapy. And I was very young, like 4 years old, 5 years old. Art therapy, I guess, is what I was doing at the time. And my mother had a degree in child development. So no doubt she had a hand in that. But when I started reading online, I Googled, well, what I was actually interested in connecting with, and I didn't want to make this so personal, but connecting with that psychoanalyst whose name was Mrs. First, folks. If you know, psychoanalyst, his histoire, historique, maybe, I don't think she's a writer or anything, but she was Mrs. First in New York City around 1965. And when I started to I wonder if I could find out anything about her, where was that, and stuff like that. Instead, it just comes up art therapy, like art plus therapy. There's some great resource in New York City, and then they have a great description of what art therapy is. And as I was 2 sentences in, I just started bursting out into tears. So is that a thought or an emotion? Now I've started thinking about it, but I think that, often it's when you're thinking about something, you're then, of course, stuck or depressed, or you start, or you're feeling enlivened. For me, just sometimes reading a couple of words can make me cry.
I love that. My mom taught me crying is really healthy for you emotionally, but also physically, because you're literally getting toxins out of your body. It's like a way to excrete, and we don't think of that. We just think it's an emotional thing, and it's
Right.
also, So now, do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
Yeah, I have to say I would like to more pursue happiness, and I tend to more focus on finding meaning, and so it's TikTok, right?
That is good. So does the brain more detect consciousness or create consciousness?
Boy, let me take it out and observe it for a moment.
That was a great answer.
Right now, it's creating consciousness. Put it back in my head and do the David Bowie sort of what I used to call the heavy metal nicking when the subway train's coming, and you're just like, put your head out slightly, like David Bowie's head at an angle. I don't know, man. The my sense is that and this is probably a very basic question that's been handled by almost every philosopher around, from Descartes to Escher, right?
Yeah.
So I think that the mind is unconscious that it's creating consciousness, and I don't know. I think I don't have anything profound to say or studied in this way, but it's a very good question.
Yeah, the visual was enough. There's no right or wrong answers. I'm not even seeking answers. I'm just seeking discussion. And so, what's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
Probably, I would think speed of thought because we're here.
Hello. Audre Lorde, the great poet, said, "You can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools." Yvonne Rainer said, "Oh, you can if you expose the tools." What new tool do you suggest? And you don't have to apply the quotes or not.
To destroying the master's house, right?
Well,
That's
it's sort of a tongue twister because I'm
Mhm.
not really implying that you need to even think about the two quotes. I'm just
Okay,
being a smartass
gotcha.
suggesting two quotes about tools. The basic question is, what new tool do you suggest? But most people do just what you did. Oh, you mean
Uh, yeah,
to she says to dismantle the master's house, you got to use the master's tools.
yeah. Well, look at deep fakes. Where are those going?
Yeah.
Is that going to dismantle the house? I don't think so. It's like uh, kind of revving it up, and that though it is a new tool, and this new Tom Hanks one, they're saying, well, gee, that's what I'm noticing is like it's gotten really good since the last one, so it's getting better and better. What tools can we invent ourselves? I often used to think that great innovation comes from the military first and kind of trickles down onto our fingertips, and we don't even know where it came from. And wouldn't it be great to have a Department of Peace where it's like that for feeling good, healing our heart? How do you heal your heart that's got scar tissue on it? Surely there's a way to address that. We could do everything else with phantom invisibility cloaks on the airplanes and everything else. And who knows, there may be a glimmer of software developed by the military that we could use for something like that. But in any case, I think that what would be really of a benefit to us would be to have a Department of Peace where we're inventing things that are serving world peace and tranquility and environmental stewardship and all these great things. Technology, I think, exists. It's a matter of applying it, and finding the suitability and applying it. And I may have more on this later.
That was good because just think of your answer. What's a new tool? A Department of Peace. You didn't say, like, that is amazing because departments already exist, but you're saying there's a new department that we should have. How simple is that?
Right,
Duh.
go to the seventh floor. That's like where the simulated Tesla is.
Hey, you're talking our language. Now, what do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
I currently worry just personally that I wake up on a negative note. Like, so I'm sure like just saying something like some word will come into my head that's just totally unnecessary. And then, so like my wife says, thank it and just let it go. Thank you. I don't really need you. But why have that little hustle in the morning or hassle? I'll think about it one more moment because what I do think about, I often, I'm kind of oriented towards the past in general, replaying things and asking questions and like being surprised by images that come into my head where, oh wow, I remember that perfectly. But I would love to start creating the future like before I go to bed for myself and my family and all that, kind of envisioning what's next, what's possible.
That's beautiful. Frank Zappa asked the question, who are the brain police? And he didn't say these people are the brain police. He said, who are? So is it someone inside you, or is it some outside force? You can ponder this. I love what your wife said. Think about it for a second and then let it go. Because, is it illegal to have bad thoughts? If there's brain police like, oh, you're busted, you had bad thoughts. Well, who's determining whether they're bad thoughts? And maybe that's the way of alleviating you from acting on them, that you let But
if you become the polite traffic cop who just says, okay, look, we'll stop her. Just thank you. Okay, thanks.
Move on. I like your wife saying thank you. Oh, thank you. I'll pass.
And the guy going by,
So McLuhan learned from Ezra Pound that artists are the antenna of the race. They're broadcasting the hidden psychic effects of the things we invent. So in the long run, we can learn how to cope with them. So McLuhan said, well, we can, these artists are broadcasting these hidden psychic effects, but we still ignore them. Why do we ignore the hidden psychic effects, even though we can turn to the artists, the writers, filmmakers to reveal them to us?
Beautiful, beautiful. That's great. It seems they're ignored because the artistic communication channels are not by any means revered, nor are they supported, certainly to the extent that they should be. And in this country of America, very little at that. And what seems to be valued, of course, is a kind of, very organized system of choices that are really feeding instead of the other way around, inviting you to make things. And I think if people felt more connected with the process of creation and how fulfilling that is, and even experiencing art, how beneficial and healing that can be, transformative. But because it looks like ancient cultures didn't have such a disconnect between the artist, the shaman, the maze in the fields. It was all part of a continuum. My wife is Greek, so she has a great reverence and connection with just the history of this thing. That art used to be a center, and of course the divinations were part of a yearly ritual, at least, to go to Delphi and connect with those visions and pay homage and pilgrimage. But today, do we pilgrimage somewhere to get like some crazy drunken person spouting off, essentially what would we consider gibberish? So you could just get that on a few channels, and maybe we don't realize that it's gibberish and indoctrination. Why people resist it? There also may be some, or why it's not embraced commercially or generally by individuals is it's weird, like to take on the affectations of some new thing that no one's ever seen and to really get into it. So I look forward to you helping everyone to not get so freaked out by it and to accept these things that we are resisting now too much.
Yeah. I love that word weird because I had a funny experience with it in the last year. I looked it up on etymology and it said where it came from. And then for some reason, I thought it said weird comes from someone having ESP. I goes, that's perfect. And then I said, well, I better recheck that. And then I rechecked it and it wasn't there. And somehow I morphed it, but it still sounds great because weird does connotate an outlier kind of feeling, like, oh, those are the weird people, we're the normal people. And then some of the normal people go, well, I want to be part of the weird people. but it's like we all have a little of both, but I love the word weird.
Yeah, indeed.
It's a great word. Are you more afraid of old ideas or more afraid of new ideas?
Gee, it's a mixed bag because there are some scary old ideas that are coming back. It's whether it's and also then in between there's revisionist history, like suppressing the civil rights movement, or in terms of information from textbooks, or just a whole sort of point of view. I think that those new ideas of suppression, which in a sense are more sophisticated, having been through the 1950s and 60s, and probably even the 20s and 30s with the motion picture codes that were keeping things a certain way. So to revive when these sort of bad ideas, I'd call them, I guess, that are squelching human thought and expression, come back, rear their ugly heads, so to speak, they're often very sophisticated with protection. Like you look at the protest fences of today, these people in power have learned, best thing is just to keep it a mile down the road. Then we don't have to really deal with it. Well, that's pretty smart. How'd you figure that out? Oh, through a police riot in '68, for instance, which is a different way to go. And it makes the national news, although there's a delay because, as you know, they were shooting film. And so it's all like, but still. And so that might be something to learn too, is like, hey, get rid of film altogether, because once it gets to the lab, you don't know what's going to happen and like how long it's going to take it by then. But anyway, that's a digression for sure. I think when these bad things come back, so in contrast, I'm sure that good things are getting even better. We just, don't, I don't want to poo-poo it at all. The good ideas, like say, again, a Department of Peace, or it might be getting off of fossil fuels. Well, yeah, but that intermediary where Exxon had lied about their own propaganda brainwashing of the whole planet, how do you deal with that? It's like there are new ideas for how Exxon can rebrand itself. Great for them, but where's the actual implementations? I mean, it seems like the good things that come back, so to speak, like we should do something about the environment. It's like such a struggle to lift up that boat, and we're doing it. But the bad things seem so easy, like, hey, just let the police use their munitions because, and we'll see it on the streets, and it becomes like a display for munitions, so, an advertisement. So they kind of often get it easy. They sort of, hate to say it, darker forces and constraint and all of that. But there is certainly hope, and we're seeing it, take a foothold in other ways more than ever recently. So that's encouraging too. So it's a mixed bag from my point of view.
Well put, Nile. I appreciate how articulate you are. And can you conjure up your earliest memory ever, or one of them?
One early memory was a standoff with a big rooster on the farm I was growing up on in Connecticut. And I just wanted to get near the red tractor that was in the sunlight. And, red for kids is still probably grooving on the red. And that paint in 1964 on the tractor was doing some stuff. And I just thought, I want to get closer to that, maybe to feel the rubber tire in the sun. But this big ass rooster was there, just like, we're squared off at an angle. Like he's at a 45-degree angle. And I probably panicked because I felt he was the size of me. And I'm thinking, I'm just going to make a run for it. I run towards the tractor. Rooster runs towards me and knocks me right the fuck down and starts going for my eyes and stuff. And I'm like, suddenly my world has changed. and I've never quite been the same. But that's an early memory that I still have. You know, they somehow the chicken's head was the head of the rooster was cut off, probably unceremoniously, you know, shortly after that happened. But it was, I'm sure, scary for everybody involved. Yeah.
Yeah. You should have took the tip from Flannery O'Connor. She taught her chickens how to walk backwards.
Uh,
All of a sudden go backwards.
that's good.
So is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
Well, it's more. Let's see. I guess a key word there could be more. But you know, for an artist like myself, I mean, someone who works with words and images, and you know, what else have you really got but your memory, unless you're in the cafes or somewhere and you're drawing and you're things that are actually happening. So I would say for an artist, it's really more useful, essential, and like vital to have lots of memories. But interestingly, I mean, I don't know this for a fact, but people maybe who have lost their memory, maybe temporarily or for a period of time. I mean, maybe they're making fantastic art, but what's the meaning for them and the connection to what they're creating? So that's one thing. But I guess emotionally, you know, it's different things are going on there. And I've lost my train of thought on what we were talking about.
That was good. No, you did really good. That was super. Tell me someone who is a role model and made a big impact on you in your immediate family and then outside your immediate family. And just briefly, what did you get from them?
Well, let's see. I think outside the family, gosh, I'll park that for a second as the clock ticks down here. Yeah,
No, buddy, you're the first.
My father, you know, my father, Terry Southern, celebrated author and, you know, really interesting, amazing guy. I mean, he was so fun to be around at any age. And I learned so much from him about all kinds of things that he didn't even know he was imparting to me, because he was a very self-reflective guy. He was not into a kind of prose that was revealing of himself. He used to quote T.S. Eliot and say that poetry is not an expression of emotion. It's, you know, a kind of sublimation of it, but you know, but any artist could recognize that, you know, that there's emotion there. And Terry was very much like, thought that was kind of self-indulgent. I think he was not a writer like many of his peers to really put himself authentically in the first person in all of this. He was much more about tweaking the knobs. And I got this sense of that is the knobs of reality to really bring it up many notches and focus in on things that were troubling people, or soon would when he would bring it out. Often his friends, he would do that conversationally. He was never like that with me, where, you know, he would try to, you know, where someone could think, oh, he's putting him down or something, or critiquing the whole thing of childhood, for instance. Although I have to say he was not a traditional father, but the influence that, like, he used to make Super 8 films with me, and where I'm the star, and eventually I became the director for these films we'd make. But I realized early on that these films were just, you know, it was just about making stuff up and combining genres and playing with form and cliches. And so here's an example of where my earliest introduction to my father's world, I'm using these Helvetica, very fancy letters, for raised letters for titles, you know, and we would light them with a sun gun, and there's shadow effects, and it's really, you know, I think these letters were, you know, imported from Sweden or something. It was really like sticky and everything. And so I am creating his dialogue. I mean, I'm taking it down and setting it. I'm setting his dialogue. So I don't know. What did I learn from all that? It's like, that my world has to do with an over the top presentation in this very controlled manner. It's like fantasy world is valuable. Creating mystery is valuable. Creating, I mean, in these films, he would wear a mask. So I could go on, and I'm exploring this myself in film. But my mother, I have to say, to digress, the more I think about what she experienced and did with me as a single mom in New York City when I'm, 5 years old, 4 years old, it's just tremendous, and I'm learning more about her now. So there's, in terms of outside, there's my friend Mark America with a K. I was impressed that he just has always been calling his own tune, and his own tune having nothing to do with his parents, just following his bliss, so to speak, attracted to, a certain kind of writing. And here in Boulder, Colorado, that's how I arrived here. So I'd say that was pretty influential, watching him. So I followed him here.
Dang, Nile, you're doing so well, because we could go for 2 to 8 hours on your dad alone, and then always, not leaving your mom out was really beautiful, and you did it well. Did your parents raise you a particular religion?
No, both is somewhere between agnostic and atheist, I suppose. So no.
If God exists, what would you like God to tell you after you die?
I'll just say that my mother was a Buddhist, but she didn't try to draw me in. I was just thankful that she had Buddhism, but my father, there was never any sense with him that religion was worth kind of going to, so to speak, or going into. If God didn't, could you repeat the question, please?
Well, if God does exist, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
Wow.
Wow, that's a great answer, Nile.
I wouldn't want him to say wow, because it's unless he was saying it with like, boy, you really did great, as opposed to like, wow, can't believe you're going back there, to work it out all again, So I guess that's a funny answer, or not that it needs to be funny, but gee, I would love for God. Well, it would be wonderful for him to say, you see why it all makes sense. And then I would get it like, absolutely. I'm so with you. Thank you.
That is an answer I've never had, and I love it. And do you pray?
I just, between us, but my wife grew up in the Orthodox Church. I'll just say that I did need to get baptized in order to marry her, Christian Orthodox. That was fun and not very heavy at all. And in a foreign language, so I didn't really understand what the hell was going on. But do I pray? I mean, certainly, I've gotten used to going into the Greek Orthodox Church, and I'm used to watching her, that is my wife's mother, lighting candles in sort of like little shrines around the house, and light a candle for somebody. And I do that, especially when I'm feeling really like somebody needs help, or we need help, or whatever it is. So the candle thing is really, sort of morphs into or evolves into thoughtful, I guess you would call it prayer. So yeah, I do, whether I think it or speak it or do it. But certainly I'm coming from a place, originally that had none of that. And it's there's more of a contemplative, and because my wife has moved on from, that is, Greek Orthodoxy into much more of a sort of shamanic approach. So I'm into that too. I really am.
That was good. It reminded me of Lord Buckley's joke. The thief is in the church and he knows he can score some loose change out of the little altar where you put a quarter in and light a candle. So he's taking the money out, and God's voice comes and goes, "Sinner, what are you doing?" He goes, "Oh, I'm sorry, God, please forgive me." And then the sinner looks up at God and he goes, "If I wasn't doing this, you wouldn't have a job."
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Nile, do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
Mm. Gee. Well, clearly, when evil uses people as a vehicle, evil exists, right? Then again, look at all these very popular shows, which I myself have watched some of, and we're drawn to evil. We want to understand it. We sort of can't get enough of it. Clearly, it's there, and is it evil for us to watch it? I don't think so, but it's maybe it's also another way to look at it is certain people reveling in, the extremes of human capacity for inflicting pain, inflicting suffering. What is that? Would you call it evil? You could break it down and say, well, let's name all these things that are really like outside of the norm and so-called, but you don't see it all the time. When you do see it, you realize, wow, it is there. That girl didn't get home, and we're now looking for her. And so people acting out those evil desires, I guess we'd say, it could be that word evil, I'm sure, is short and sweet in all languages, but the meaning of it is really not entirely clear, especially when we're watching it, we're reading about it, trying to understand it. Some of us are doing it, so it's a whole little smoking pyre, and there may be some, fixation on working through it, walking through that fire, and some people do it too extremely, and it's very destructive.
Really well put. How do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? And this one I'm going to set up with a few modern thinkers' thoughts. Alan Watts said, "If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them." Coppola stole from the mob and the samurais. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK said, "Forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name." Fellini says, "I need an enemy." Chinese proverb goes, "He who cannot agree with their enemy will be controlled by them." So it's a lot of thoughts. The basic question is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you react to the first quote, Alan Watts? "If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them."
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess it depends on who you are and what your goal is. If you're dealing with an enemy that's invisible and is of human form, and you don't identify them, you don't name them or interact with them in any way, I agree with that thing of, keep your enemies a little closer, or at least know where they are, because you want to be ready. And if they're in a situation where you can dialogue, I think that dialogue can really produce results that are positive. And you see that even, the most bitter of enemies today on the world stage, they end up coming to the table together. And whether it's a PR stunt or, one is getting out of it, they want generally to dialogue. Those that don't are often just so fanatical that there's no point. So to be specific, I mean, I don't know how I would advise someone dealing with Boko Haram and some of the fundamentalist, But then again, those who kidnap children, like has happened in the news lately and has happened in the past, let's say in Somaliland and places where it seems like money is what they're really after. So you can talk with that enemy, and and often with positive results. I would say that you can't. I would probably advise someone, you can't vanquish this enemy and live a normal life. If you kill them, for instance, you'll probably face consequences. But also, these kinds of enemies, so to speak, that I've mentioned, it doesn't seem like they'll ever be fully vanquished because it's often an ideology. So I would advise, don't have any hope on vanquishing your enemy. Just try to deal with them in the way that where you can save face and also produce results, that you can live with.
Well put. You brought up Bruce Wagner, who I interviewed a couple of weeks ago in our correspondence, and I say a quote that goes like this. Baba Ram Dass said, "I'm having a real hard time loving George Bush." and before I said that, in the midst of this question, sometimes I say that, Bruce said, "Well, I was visiting Ram Dass and he had a little statue of Trump on his altar."
That's great.
That's what I say. What else can you do but love these people? I mean, does hating really help?
Yeah, that's right.
I go round robin at my groups often. Is hate more innate or more invented? And everybody does. They don't want to think that humans invent. They don't want to think it's innate in humans. They want to think we culturally learned hating.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll leave that question aside and move to the next one. This is really fun now. I appreciate it. James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin about 100 years ago at his own little cinema. He basically checked out. He said, "This is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree?" Faulkner says years later, sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism. Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
Well, metaphors are probably the most powerful ingredient and active force, for humankind. That we respond to metaphor. We want to see reflections of ourselves, and we can empathize. It's empathy with characters who are doomed and fatally flawed, and all the things that the Greeks early on understood, that humans are kind of wired a basic way, and Aristotle really developed, I believe, the tenets of tragedy, comedy that pretty much operate under and over parallel tracks. Of course, the tragedies end very badly for the protagonist, who kind of realizes, what his problem is too late. So that's a great human thing too, is like, look, we could show you kind of a mirror of life, a representation of life, like that Psychedelic Furs song, or Public Image, which I think it was Psychedelic Furs, but imitation of life of Christ. Anyway, imitation is big in Greek dramas and up throughout history, and of course in films we see, and we want to recognize ourselves and relate to it, and we have that capacity for love and understanding and empathy, and I think that's why we're drawn, as opposed to it's hard to look at ourselves like, God, what's all this clutter and what can I do about it? And oh my God, you get very kind of lost in the sauce of your own, who you are. But when you can take a step back and see maybe it's about somebody else or some other culture, even, that could be too, that looking at films and cultural products by other cultures, whether it's French or Korean, or sometimes there's a further sort of distancing, in a sense, depending on your experience with that culture, to really see, wow, we recognize difference and we appreciated, I think. And that's why we're drawn to stories, obviously. Stories are important, and metaphor being behind the best stories that are out there, I think.
Yeah, really good. I think you've been talking to my wife because she says the same line. What's all this clutter?
I'm sure. Yeah, my wife's kind of given up on that, but we're making
hey,
a comeback. Yeah.
I need your secret. You get a wife to give up on clutter? Oh my
Well,
God.
no, we're just taking a breather because I got the broken leg.
Oh, okay. Okay, so you've sort of explained this, but you can just give the through line on what first attracted you to pursue filmmaking, what first attracted you to pursue writing. I mean, it's sort of evident, you laid it out, but where did you go, I can do that?
Well, yeah, right. Thank you for that. Well, as I said, I was making films with my dad, and that was an experience that, he allowed me to, he encouraged me to write this. Why don't you write the script? So, in these big letters, I like the screenplay form. So there's something formal about the process of making films. So I already was doing that with him as a sort of natural state. How lucky is that? And I remember sometimes going to sleep at night. My dad would be there with the rewinds, with the Super 8. The lights are out except for the light from the little Kodak, whatever it was. And he was editing the footage that we had shot. And I just thought that was there's something so kind of romantic about it, the sound of it and going back and forth. You could hardly see it, In terms of making film, I guess, I was it's so easy to be inspired by great work. So I was lucky enough to have a film class in New York City when I was even before high school, right? We were watching the Janus Collection. We were reading Bergman's 4 screenplays. How old was I? I don't know. I was not even a teenager, I think. So Bleecker Street Cinema became my go-to place just to get more of that connection. And so I would be there all the time, just taking it in. Now, it could be that I also knew, because my father was all about film and all, but he was also about literature. And I, at the same time, even earlier, I wanted to know everything there was to know about Ernest Hemingway. So I read Papa Hemingway and all these books and loved his prose. And I kind of knew at an early age that, I should know something about this. My dad's said to be pretty good at it. And that was really enjoyable. And then I was, from an early age, writing stories as well and things like that, and getting a lot of charge out of it. In college, I was I was known as a great cameraman, the way I would shoot things. So in terms of writing, when I really got serious about writing nonfiction, it was really looking at my father's life, which was sort of a, endless repository of great, rich material. And as I mentioned, my mother now is becoming more of that. She's a really, really interesting subject for me at some point. Like I say, I'm oriented towards the past, but I like to make things in the future. My own personal writing is more dystopic, futuristic, and imagistic. It's more of a, things that are still coming to be true, possibly. It was like I was envisioning, a surveillance sort of crowd-funded surveillance back in the early 90s in England. But I think I have something in my blood that's naturally makes me want to create, and I battle with my demons about, in terms of well, how come I'm not creating more? But I'm, eager to work through that. And, TikTok, as I said before.
Yeah. You evoked the joke that was McLuhan and Hitchcock's favorite. 2 goats are eating 35 millimeter film coming out of a film can. And one goat turns to the other and goes, "The book was better."
I said to someone who's in Hollywood, a young filmmaker guy. I said, "Do you have an editor yet?" He said, "Oh, I am an editor. I mean, I thought I'd do it myself." And I came back and, with an exclamation mark, "So great, you're a cutter." And then he came back with, "That's so cool. You use that really old-fashioned term. Most people today, my age wouldn't know what you're talking about."
Yeah, that's great. So a screenwriting teacher told me that great art or great film is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Stanley Kubrick said the opposite. Great art, great film is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. What role does intention play in your creative process?
That's terrific. Well, it used to be when I shot film and processed it and all of that, and I'm sure you can relate to this because there's something about the magic of what's going to come back. You don't know what it's going to really be. You thought it was going to be like this, and you're shooting it, look great but there's something about the alchemical process of the material coming back to you, at least with film, that was really magic. So I was connected with that for a long time. And then when video came in, still that was sort of new and fresh in terms of looks you would see, and even editing, you have to chase the splice down like for 40 minutes and like hope that something doesn't go wrong. And so there's like a lot of tension in the process. Now that it's so easy, in terms of image making, the process is, I think, not as magical. It's more precise, but still there's magic that comes. The new Premiere, for instance, has a feature where you just press a button and it'll create an edit point at every single cut that you had painstakingly made with cement and everything else way back when. Now, how would you deal with that otherwise? Let's say you have footage of a tropical island and because you're only 15 years old and you want to just do something cool, put Brian Eno music to it and you chop it all up and sort of invert it, and it becomes like this great collage, or you thought it was great collage, but now 30 years later you want to restore it all again because it was a beautiful island, goddammit, and I want to see what it looked like. I want to see one wave crashing and it continuously. Press a button now, all those things, and now I can get it. I could email it to an intern and download the link. And not that I have tons of interns, but I'm thinking probably I'll end up doing this. But anyway, hey, just try to restore all these images. The cut points are there. It's great. So
Amazing.
The process often is driven by the new technologies that are here. Of course, I don't know all these new technologies, but what draws me to writing, is often not being clear. It's more like opening up a notebook and seeing the fragmentary responses to something that I was experiencing or watching or overheard dialogue, and also seeing in my little notebook some stains that had made the ink smear, and I just thought, wow, this is so beautiful. And then it would give me more inspiration to sort of tie that all together, bring it out of its little notebook form with the smear that can't even really be reproduced. And I'll just say that in terms of the nonfiction book I did about Terry living in Paris, that's my father living in Paris, creating Candy, and the sort of saga of this book, Candy, and which has an interesting history. But it also captures, the challenge was also to capture what was it like to live in Paris in 1949 to 55. And so that kind of research is so great, where you can find out, more details. That's, of course, for creator, especially writer, so invaluable, because the specificity is there. And at the end of the day, all you have are words, and you can have a section of images. But I think, it's inspiring to use raw material. I'll just finish on that particular book. When my father died, I created a memorial program with my mother, and it says at the bottom, if anyone has letters from Terry Southern, please send them to us, because we'll put a book together is what we'd like to do. So Terry's lawyer, not Terry's lawyer, Maurice Girodias, the publisher's lawyer, had this whole wonderful chain of correspondence between Terry, his co-writer, and Mason Hoffenberg, who was a poet and a very interesting guy from the village scene who married a French woman. But so in the mail comes 50 letters between all three of them. It became the Candyman,
Wow.
Oh.
That's amazing. Now I want to read all these books, and I'm so grateful for you to carry this on. And you sort of anticipated the next question very well, because we could sort of say Abel Gance invented rapid montage in about 1922. And what you were saying is like you could go for an app and say, could you take my footage and turn it into rapid montage and then turn it into Tarkovsky montage and give me the two examples? You hit a little button and it goes, edit like Tarkovsky, edit like Gans. So I spoke with Michael Apted about 40 years ago. And I said, why do rock video editors feel so obliged to edit fast? This is when MTV was causing Marty Scorsese to say, I edit my films faster because of MTV. And we don't really know that Abel Gance invented that, but it wasn't dominant. Rapid montage wasn't a dominant editing style for many years. And then MTV had sort of blossomed a little more. And so Michael Apted said, well, because we've learned to take in information faster. And my question is basically asked with a bias, can we literally learn to take in information faster, or are we just brainwashed to believe we can?
I suspect it depends on the person delivering the information. Like Craig Baldwin, for instance, who I know you're pals with, he has a real affinity with sort of image wrangling, and I would like these streams of imagery, and it comes down to flow. It takes it's not just push the quick cut button. It's you really have to be more of an artist, like a musician who is looking for flow. And as any film editor knows, and director too, you're one frame off with one of your cuts, and the audience who doesn't know what the hell really you're doing, something's a little off. You can tell it's just not quite hitting it right. And often I'm in the editing room and I'm thinking, you just try stuff. Let's slide it 5 frames there and see if then we can feel good inside about the whole flow and you never really know what the reason is why it works, other than trying it out. Now, that's very much like painting. What if you make a mistake in painting? Often it's like, oh, gee, I don't like that, but I'll work around it because I have to now because it's down. So, the quick cut, by the way, is a term I heard Pablo Ferro use. I was his assistant for many years, and he was one of the great trailer cutters. He cut the Dr. Strangelove trailer, Clockwork Orange, which is in camera quick cuts but he said that, he's credited with inventing something he called the quick cut. Now, he came from an advertising background where the pressure was so intense to just grab you in the magazine, or with even just the font alone, generally is probably what it came down to. First glance, oh, I want to look more. Now, if you look at Pablo Ferro's Dr. Strangelove trailer, you'll see that it's like a magisterial, assemblage of 2 to 3 frame images, maybe 7, 8, but with the use of sound and with the use of questions like, why did the U.S. Army say, and so everything was quick. The why did the everything was about a new rhythm of life that was sort of the modern age, coming from advertising. And he also, being half, I would say, half Cuban, Native American, had something to do with his his real, and also maybe his constant smoking of marijuana to get into this flow. Because I would watch him in later years watching the monitors, and he's sort of using a shoebox to and he's like this or like that. Bruce Conner also, I was exposed to a film of his that my dad used to screen because Bruce had given Terry a copy of a report. And it was one of a few different versions. And the unique thing about this version was it had Bruce Conner's blood on it because Bruce had cut his thumb and it was all over the film. And it created this awful, eerie, tinted red, because that film was about the Kennedy assassination, really. Talk about quick cuts. But it's not like some automated thing of, oh yeah, just jazz it up, razz it up. Everything is very controlled, but often also tied to a shamanistic, let's try this. Let's try repeating this image 10,000 times. That may be an overstatement, but let's try repeating this image for 10 minutes. This one sequence where the security guys are trying to open the ambulance door and it's locked, and then the whole thing starts again, and Jackie O is part of it, over and over and over and over, and the blood is there too. But Bruce had done all these incredible quick cuts, so I think it's not driven by pushing a button. And I know that wasn't your question, but I think that it has to do with the person creating the flow, really, at the end of the day, and how good they are at gauging, when it works. It's like a musician. How do you tell a musician, well, I don't know, you got the eighth notes thing going, and but it's like, does it work? Does it touch you? Does it move you? Does it keep you watching?
Yeah, really well put. Yeah, you are so aware, Nile, that the question was a little different, but what you did was exactly what my motive is just to get people to talk. And you must have ESP, because a second before you said Bruce Conner's name, I wrote his name here, because first of all, just to go backwards, it's like that's what Herzog and Cecil Taylor say. You got to bleed for cinema, and Cecil actually plays piano and his fingers are bleeding on the keys. to know that about Bruce's film. So he sent your dad a 16 millimeter, and it was unique to that print with the red blood. It wasn't like every copy had the red blood, or who knows,
That's right.
But
I believe the way it was told to me is that that Bruce was actually there screening his print at Terry. Terry had a projector. Bruce cuts his finger by mistake, and he's there making sure the film is okay anyway. And he just decides to let it do an effect. Imagine the blood when it's red and dripping, and oh my God, then it becomes a real happening. And then, how great at the end of the night said, Terry, why don't you keep this? You might want to dry it out like this so it doesn't cool or whatever.
That is a beautiful story. I'm going to use that all the time now in the future. And, what you did evoke too was bringing up a master like Craig Baldwin, who studied with Bruce Conner, is that always, we see a lot of films with cute archival footage now. And it's like, wow, what a cool old clip. No, the point is to make it look like a brand new film, like a Max Ernst collage. It looks like those graphics were supposed to be there, and it's a whole new thing. It's not just a collection of cool old things,
Yep.
So, the bottom,
write that down. Not just a collection of cool old things is a good motto for any documentarian, which I consider myself now too.
Just look at Adam Curtis films. Yikes. Give me Craig Baldwin, please.
Yeah,
but all the power to him. I love, they're all celebrating an art form. So
I think sorry to interject here, but I think when you can find meaning through the combination of unlikely inspired sources, it's more of a mystical thing, and I'm sure that's where we love to live, and that's the great thing, of course, in the editing room. You just, let's try this music. Oh my God, that works like perfectly.
Yeah. I hate to do this, but the documentary Not Film, which is about Beckett's only film, starts, and you get this footage of Buster Keaton and Zygmunt Vertov, and Russ Lebanon made this beginning, and it looks like they belong. It doesn't look like, I mean, unless you know, oh, that's Herzog, that's newsreel footage. Now that's Buster Keaton. I mean, you got to have some knowledge. I know,
cool.
but the way it melts into one flow, like your word is so perfect. It flows, and it's like, whoa, how did he do that? Because the normal film viewer person, non-history film history person's not going to know that source on each one. But even for someone who does, when it flows that smooth, that's where you're like, whoa, that's your first word was like, what's the best thing for a human being? Collage.
Right. And a nod to Jonas Mekas, you know, who had a sort of shrine to this kind of filmmaking that didn't have rote techniques or simple answers, and would operate more on a mystical level, and that was sort of his curational and approach.
Yeah, really well put. The bottom line question there really was, is it literally possible to multitask?
Well, Stanley Kubrick apparently used to say, and he used to wear 2 watches, by the way, at least in case one failed, is what I also hear. But that he calculated, because he tried it himself, if you work on 3 things at the same time, it takes 9 times as long. So hence the long gap between films, I guess. So maybe it all worked out to be the same. I don't know. But can you ultimately multitask? Yeah, the proof is in the pudding.
I love it. But are you insinuating that Kubrick did work on 3 things, or he only worked on 1?
I think apparently he may have found himself working on 3 things. Maybe that was in his family life. Like, let's see if I can get the dog walked and the kid fed and something else in the next hour. I could imagine him like wondering, like kind of like Larry Rivers, the artist. He'd ask himself, like, I wonder how long it takes to do all these. You know, he'll ask these questions that only, you know, that have no answer really. But I get the sense that Kubrick tried it and realized you just can't do it, and moved on to this one idea approach.
Yeah, we got to do this quick divert, because I asked, in the very seat I'm sitting at in Venice, California, I had the honor to interview James Harris with all these questions. Cool. And he's like an old, I don't say old, he's an elder who still plays tennis, and he's like, go get him. You know, I said, when Stanley pulled Clockwork for 30 years from UK screens only, was it more a PR thing, or more he was literally scared that humans were beating other people up because of his film? Like, my film called Violence, you know, I mean, just your bottom line, not to go too off on it, your bottom line hunch, what would you go for more?
Well, Terry worked with him on Dr. Strangelove, and it was clear that Kubrick really cared and was really afraid of what for his children. So I think that gives you an indication that he was a bit nervous about maybe, you know, upsetting people on that level, that it could be like either causing violence or causing people to lose their minds in some way. I think but however, since it was only banned really in England, right, I could just see him, since he's living there too, keeping the peace, you know, for one thing, and why push it? Because it was doing well all over the world at that time. Yeah. But I think he really did care about human and his relations and all of that, for sure.
Yeah, James said he cared about 2 things, film and family. But I think deep down, if we could psychoanalyze Stanley, he knew it was not intentionally a good PR act, but it was actually deeper, probably knowing, well, if I just pull it on UK screen, because supposedly the cops came to him and said, you've got to pull your film from UK screens. Well, what about other countries? Why would you only pull it from you? And then kids could go on the black market in London and buy VHS copies anyways,
Right. So I see your point that it's like a limited containment. It has PR value for sure. Controversy, something, and so it's like a controlled way to manage that campaign and to do it, in conjunction with what he's being asked to do too.
Yeah, it's like Buñuel taking rocks, pebbles in his pocket to a screening of L'Age d'Or or Un Chien Andalou. And was he there to help the protesters go, this sucks, and they're throwing shit at the screen?
That's great.
Or was he there to protect himself because they go, he's the maker, get him. So then he throws the rocks at the guys attacking him. Most
Maybe
people,
both are true. Both are true, maybe,
both true. He wouldn't commit to either. He would say, no, they just happen to be in my pocket.
Yeah.
So let's see. What was the motive of the cave artist? Not what Herzog or anthropologists say, but just your intuitive sense.
Well, you use the word sense. I think human nature is often wanted to make sense and leave something behind too. And maybe something to look at as well and ponder on. But also it's probably a bit of control. Like if you can, show what that puma looked like that killed a couple of people, that's really valuable. It's information, it's story, it's detail, it's accuracy, but it might also be heightened in a way. Okay, the cave paintings, I guess it shows that man's innate, capacity to create goes all the way back. And, it's amazing that gift and capacity isn't valued more and sort of delved into in society, in the sciences as well. The connection between art and striving to answer your very question, I think if we knew what was going on in those caves in terms of painting, I think we would, be in a better place today if we thought more along the lines of, your kind of questioning. I think your kinds of questions should be like a side channel at the White House.
Thank you. They're not really mine. I collected them from people like Christine McKenna and all these other people who've asked all these questions over the years.
Well, then they should have an office for you at the White House to do your work. Damn it! Not that you want to be there. You look pretty comfortable where you are.
That's a compliment. Thank you. And back to your intention in creating. Duchamp said there's no art without an audience. How much do you think of your audience when you're creating your art? When you're making your film or writing, how much are you thinking of them?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, definitely thinking of them because I'm thinking of myself first. And I'm the, classic audience of one. I mean, sort of idea when you're really just creating for your own enjoyment. And my enjoyment happens to have to do with flow and easing an audience into the information. I mentioned earlier that after my father died, I received 30, 40, 50 letters in the mail. And I thought these are so fantastic. For one, they're, like dozens of letters by my father, who writes a damn good letter, and his great pal Mason Hoffenberg, also hilarious writer and obsessive and everything. But how do you present that to an audience? Oh, here's some cool letters. Like, it's not an appendix. You want to make a flowing work of art, really, that tells something about what happened. And also, the challenge was that leads into extracts from these letters that propels both the narrative and the plot lines and stuff that's happening. So you have to find a real balance for not putting too much detail in about leading up and going on too many tangents. You kind of are on a mission to, I want to work in as much of this beautiful letter as possible. So that's great for an artist to have a real specific need. And like I said before, in painting, if you decide that's a mistake, often that will lead to the finished work being just wonderful and perfect. But it was driven by that thing you interpreted as a mistake at one point and then forgot about because it took its different course and then found itself. So that's what inspires me in creation is, again, the flow and reading it as if I'm a third party. It's easy for me to just read it fresh, start again, and go from word to word, and why is that comma there, and really just not break the magic. You want the magic to continue to just get better and better, and not suck, and not sort of stall, and not, oh, well, I thought that happened 3 years before, and who is this person that now is the center of the story? So you have to go back and set that up early on. And I love that in art, and I aspire to, achieve that, where you have these redoubling effects, like, oh, there's this trait of this guy as a kid. Oh, wow, that trait actually plays out in this way like 20 years later. Oh my God, that's how it ends. It's like on the same note. This is the stuff of life where patterns repeat, and it's sort of trying to escape your demons or whatever it is, and learning along the way. So, short answer, I'm the audience, but I write for an audience.
Yeah. When I grow up, I want to be a redoubler. That redoubling, that is good, Nile. So you anticipate the next question. You must have ESP. Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength, rather than we're normally taught to overcome a weakness. Tell me a weakness that you've incorporated to become a strength.
Wonderful question. Yeah, I'm sure I'm still working on it. I'm trying to think of the instances where this is a success. I guess generally I'm a very easygoing person, and I think that maybe too accommodating at times. Like I'm responsive to anybody, frankly, those listening who are interested in Terry Southern. That's just like, I will read the email from somebody, or the letter, or whatever it is. And I think and if it's from Hollywood, like I once interviewed William Styron, and I asked him about, because I'm doing this documentary about my father. I asked him, well, how do you deal with film, the whole film community, and do you like to engage with that? And I'm sure people come to you with ideas. And he said, the only engagement I have with Hollywood is when they send me a check. And that was purposeful. He clearly had disdain and zero interest in essentially losing time. Because I also have issues, shall we say, with personal boundaries, maybe, like I will go down different roads and try to make it work. I respond well to enthusiasm, and I often encounter that a lot because Terry can inspire a lot of the enthusiasm for new projects or anything else. So I'm trying to say, I guess, that while I think that's a weakness to be sort of have loose margins, or leaky. I think what Gene Houston, the writer and philosopher, calls leaky margins. So I got some of those, and while that could be a weakness, it's also an open door to possibilities. So I see that as a positive. Has that really paid off yet? I don't know yet, but TikTok. I think there's but it's a great question for me to think about. in the waning time we have together, but also in future. I will ponder that more, and I thank you for it.
Thank you. It's like too accommodating. That's why I'm like a Pollyanna. People, like, after every answer, I always go, "That was great, thank you." And it's like, that's what you said. One person complained to me. She says, "You keep saying that after every answer." That's, and I'm just trying to be social and accommodating, like you. Like, leaky margins is even better. But it also evoked Paul Schrader's great quote: the role of the artist is to attempt to sell out but fail.
Yeah, right.
And it's sort of like that was William Stryer. He says the only engagement is that invokes something is when they send me the check.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, there's another quote there I can't recall. The only something is between. I got to come up with that, but it's great that we forget things, then we can try to remember them later. One thing that you've done too, Nile, that's amazing is I say in my suggestions pre the interview, I say silence is okay. Most people think as soon as I ask the question, they got to start talking. And you go, yeah, and that's all right. That's the thing. How can anyone just go boom, and pull this shit out of their head immediately, because it's this like flow we want to create. But at the same time, there's nothing wrong with going, let me think about that for 5 minutes. So then, will Clinton edit out the 5 minutes of me thinking? No, we leave it in.
Well, everyone wants to be like Bruce Wagner.
Yeah.
Thoughtful guy, man. I mean, it's cool.
Yeah. It is really fun. So T.S. Eliot, who you brought up earlier, said poetry is outing your inner dialogue. What language is your inner dialogue
in? When I'm not in the chair making art, well, let me just say, when I am in the chair making art, I do collage. That is my inner. What did you say? The
inner dialogue.
Yeah. So I have a dialogue with, the detritus or the sort of flat remnants of, that I've collected over the years that seem to make sense. I have a dialogue with that, also with how I'm feeling today or what's going on around me, especially who I'm making the card for. So I used to use these self-laminating postcards. That's another project I'm going to do to bring them out in some way, because I communicated with a whole bunch of mail artists. I guess is what we became, using this same format of commercially produced card that I was involved with the production of. So that's like my favorite dialogue state, and it's often a really fast. I do them in 5 minutes, or don't dwell on them by any means, and I love them. And then you seal it up, and then you put a stamp on it that makes it official, because that's a dialogue too, is to get it through the mail system until finally it's received in a mailbox, sometimes in a body bag. Sorry, there's some problem with your mail. There seems to be some accident, and they're very apologetic, like it was a flattened snake that I found on the road or something like this. Anything that would fit within the confines of this 4x7 card, or 4x6. So otherwise, the dialogue, it's often, when I know that when I say to myself, wow, that's a great idea, that I should take note of it and, not forget it, because you forget these things, right? It's like, but I find when I'm speaking in dialogue to myself and say it out loud, wow, that's key, or that would be great, and I'm thinking about putting, what to put in this film I'm making, or it might be a book, or it might be. So that's an important thing when I'm in a dialogic state like that, to have a little, write it down. And so thanks for reminding me of that. I'm going to dust off a notebook just for that again.
Thank you, now, because my next feature is called Mail Art Body Bags. I love mail art, and I'm so sad that it sort of went away, but that was a great art form.
Cool.
That we love. So George Manupelli, who started the Ann Arbor Film Festival, the oldest experimental film festival in the world, 59 years ago, and
Wow.
it's still going. Next week, I'm be attending. His mantra was ignore yourself. Jonas Mekas said, there is no self-expression. And Cecil Taylor says, I'm just a vehicle and this stuff just comes through me. So is art making, filmmaking, writing, collaging more self-expression or more you're a vehicle for whatever technology is or culture is dominant?
Mm. Well, definitely you're a vehicle one way or the other. Okay, that's easy. Um, you know, you mentioned the Ann Arbor Film Festival, and I can't help but think, hats off to film programmers and human curated content. That goes for radio, that goes for films. I mean, bless them. How would I know about all these new films that have come out in the last 2 years and what's really worth watching without going to my local art house, which fortunately we have one here, a great programmer, and I'm set for, now I feel already better about, gosh, there's still great, vibrant human communicate, like, and also things that are breaking new ground or that just are evoking old modes, but in a new way. And so I think there's a lot to be said for that attitude of human curated whatever, and having a filter in a sense that's like a human filter where you know that they're sensitive, they know the history of whatever that is that they're, and they and so I leave part of it at that. Um, TikTok, I gotta address the rest of the question, which in terms of, I think it was about me personally, right? About me personally. Can you remind me the question again?
Well, actually, it's a lot easier if you jump to the hidden ground question is, can
Mm,
art making be egoless?
mm. Yeah, I think it can, and whether ego has to do with effect, you want to make an effect, and you want the effect not to suck, but to really be bewitching or to produce a kind of connection and reaction, and even a statement ultimately about yourself, I think, and the way you put things together, so that when that audience member, viewer walks away, they think, yeah, now I kind of know what that Nile Southern's all about. Damn, that's cool. I can't wait to see more of that. So that's definitely ego there, but still the original impulse was not that. I was not going for that effect.
Yeah.
You can't predict how people will react, but that would be wonderful because I love to look at my own work and say, wow, that is operating on all cylinders and all these things I didn't even know could happen. And oh my God, it's like it makes me feel like orgasmic a bit. Looking in a sense at my own reflection. Is that egocentric, narcissistic? I don't think so. It's more about the arrangement of the flow and how it's touching in some way. It's often the music cue hits a certain way, something happens in the background, it just moves you. You want to be moved. So that's I think the ego is not so much a part of it for the true art that's connecting at the heart level, at the human level, also at the arresting level, not to just turn you off like, ugh, ugh, but it's something else going on that keeps you looking and makes you want to finish that looking process, whether it's watching the whole film or just giving the painting a little time.
Well put. Now, Buñuel would like my sort of thing comes from him. If great art should fuck your shit up and go, I could do that,
Yeah.
So if you left the theater after a Buñuel film and you weren't like fucked up, he would say, I failed,
Right. Yeah.
But you know what I mean by fucked up in his case. But actually, it's Mallarmé and the Symbolists who
Mm.
got all their shit from Edgar Allan Poe, a good Baltimore American. And they said, Mallarmé says, don't paint the painting, paint the effect. So when you say, you stress that, it's about the effect which you're trying to accomplish, is really well put.
I love you
And
bringing
so,
in Mallarmé. Mallarmé is something I'm working with now, someone I'm working with it because Terry has lineage in a way with Mallarmé and Poe. So it's like, wow, Terry left that himself stacked up both in his writing and things he said. And, Mallarmé appears in a couple of pieces. I'm in Candy. It's a poem that Candy's father reads to her aloud. And anyway, so thank you for all these points that you raise that are hitting. It's like skimming stones across the history of, artistic expression as it relates to us, in particular, specifically.
thank you. So we've hit the 90-minute point, so I'm gonna milk it for another 15 or 20 if that's okay with you. And hopefully it's okay with Clinton. But you tell me, is that okay with you, or how many more you want to go? 5,
yeah.
10?
Okay, that's great, Clinton. Thank you so much for being there. I haven't looked at you once because it's just a big C over there.
Dude, he takes notes. You'll be blown away when he comes in with his final question. But I just want to know how you feel. Another 5, 10,
Oh no,
20.
I'm open to whatever you want, and
Okay.
I just wonder if I'm bringing in Terry too often.
No, please don't. You're not doing anything wrong. Okay, so let's. Lewis
I
Carroll.
figure I tell a story to myself and to others sometimes. Is if I had been born the son of John Steinbeck, I don't think I would be bringing him up so often and in conversation. Well, John, when my dad, blah 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 blah. I think that Terry's kind of unrecognized for a lot of the richness and diversity, and so he's a sort of a continual source of interest to me. And I think, so I often do bring him in, and it's I don't feel so bad about it, because I would feel bad if I were a really successfully famous contemporary American author's son, I think.
No, Nile, it's undeniable. I mean, if you rate who has the coolest dads, I mean, come on. The loved one alone, which is a known gem. I mean, there's so much. It's just endless. So Lewis Carroll said, I believe as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast. Have you believed in any impossible things lately?
I believe we can get off fossil fuels. Sounds, minor, but of course it's not. That would be incredible for the planet. I mean, imagine just thinking about anything relating to the planet as a whole. I think any of those things that can be addressed or be accomplished, I do flash on those impossible things occurring, and it's amazing how little instances here and there support the fact or the idea that could be happening.
Yeah. Anger can be a productive emotion when fill in the blank.
When your life's in danger.
That's good, bottom line.
Yeah.
You create what you resist. Now, this is a saying, an old saying. Bob Goldthwait, the comedian, morphed it into you are what you hate. James Joyce wrote, it's a curious thing how your mind is super saturated with the religion in which you say you disbelieve. But back to Buñuel, who nailed it. Thank God I'm an atheist. So I'm not saying you, but how do you react to this statement? One creates what one resists. You create what you resist. How do you react to that statement?
Yeah, I think we're attracted to what we don't understand, and often that's where the best stories unfurl, is in an area that's something you don't know about, and that maybe you're even resisting. Interestingly, after my mom passed away, my mother was a great active dreamer. She would write and keep dream journals and diaries, and she was a very contemplative person, unlike my father, really, and very open to signs and look what things might mean in dreamland. And she was also in analysis. And so after she passed away, I met with her therapist, and I said, my mother left all of these journals, and I'm interested in her life. And she said, it's important not to take on the unconscious of another person. I thought, wow, I was kind of like, kicking a can down the road after leaving her office, because an artist, like I was saying before, loves to have real raw material. But what if it's the dreams of your dead mother? Like, hey, why not? But she was also in some psychic pain and distress, and who knows, maybe I appear in the dream. So I respect that attitude, but I would think a more cutthroat artist would just say, fuck that. Like, so then I'm thinking lately, like, I'll go through the journals, and any dream that comes up, I'll have someone else read it and then just kind of summarize it for me, some of the images and stuff. And that actually, I thought this morning, like, just out of the blue, like, what would that be like if I actually have a process for this as a way of kind of mechanizing the thing that could be just so bad to take on some unconscious. So I'm not decided there yet, but I hope I touched on the question in some way.
Yeah, you did. And it's really, what did the person, how much weight do you put on the person who advised you? Don't take on the unconscious of another person, because how did your mom get her unconscious onto the words on the paper, on the words on the paper? There's a process, and maybe your unconscious was left in her head and what happened on the words. So the word take on, well, how? I'm going to have other people narrate. I mean, it's endless, but it is a challenge that you respected her advice. Or I imagine the therapist's advice to don't take it on. But at the same time, yeah, it's like, wow,
it was a cautionary. It was clearly cautionary, and in the land a bit of, like magic. Like, take that on. You don't know what's going to happen. Could open up some, or doors, or you don't want to, or that it could be misinterpreted. I would make too much out of it, or something like that. But at this age and this moment, I'm thinking, it's just material, it's just data, it's just the potential for powerful art, and that's what you kind of live for, is like, where can you find those sources? This is certainly one of them. Right now they're all in a box, and I'm feeling like, I should at least photograph them and, make them into, as you say, transfer them from the two-dimensional reality they were in to a two-dimensional reality that's one removed, so I can easily, I can use it or not, let's say.
Yeah, you just make a book, you don't ever proofread it, you publish it,
like
and then you just read the letters to the editor, or you read the comments on the YouTube, where you post them all on YouTube, let people read it, and then they read the comments.
That's like a Buñuelian approach to making a book. Like, or as Jean-Luc Godard once said, if I were to adapt a novel, I would actually film the novel. Like, I think he used the term on the novel, but you get the idea that he is filming a book, so he had very little interest in doing a straight on adaptation, I guess was his point.
Oh, dude, don't get me started on him, because this last week I creamed my jeans watching him a 90 minutes talk at age 91 into a Zoom session. Go online. There's a lot of them. He's been doing these, and he is unbelievable. But I have so many quotes that I love to quote of him. And one of my favorites is, Hollywood films are just documentaries of actors acting.
Good.
Come on, that is
Yeah.
brilliant. Okay, we got a few more, and then how do you find peace of mind?
I'm looking for it still. I sometimes feel my mind is like overheating machinery, and that's kind of the worst of it. I'm sure some people have it even worse than that. But how do I find peace of mind? I think currently when everyone in my family is happy and healthy and doing what they want to do, that's great peace of mind. If I have a dog around, right now I have a cat, but usually an animal will just give you instant peace of mind. You can watch them, you can pet them. There's just, you know, different degrees of love there. That the dog is usually full on love all the time. The cat's more like playing games, but loves the warmth. This cat of mine just loves to sit next to, and as soon as she's near me, I hear the humming, the purring going. I just know she's got peace of mind. I feel good in that space too. Um, but real peace of mind for me, TikTok is what I can say. It's like I want it, and I want to find more ways to step into it more easily and be there. How I do that specifically, it's usually walking in nature, definitely connecting with nature and getting lost in that natural flow and natural state of being in nature. I think that's the best thing that does it for me.
Well put. If you were walking down the street today now and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
Want to play baseball?
Right to the point. If a publisher was to release your autobiography off the top of your head, what would the title be?
Okay. Publisher wants to do my biography, and I guess stepping out of the shadow, right?
Beautiful. And they say, we would like to scent the glue in the binding. What smell would it be?
I think lavender. Why not?
What a great smell. I love that. If a statue was built in your honor, where would you want it displayed and what would it be made of?
Well, it wouldn't be a deep fake. Then it wouldn't really be, of me technically. And where would I want it to be? And I guess where, interesting. Okay, well, if we're going to go full out, it would be some new projection kind of medium that floats in the air and floats up high in the clouds, and there'd be a ton of them actually, and there's or make crossing. It'd be cool to like intermingle with others, and there's Nile. Oh cool. Oh wait. Oh, that cloud, that was cool. Yeah, that was Nile. So and what it is made of, well, I just told you.
Yeah, it really evokes Richard Brodigan. He says everybody has their roles in life and mine is clouds.
Cool.
It's like there's just a bunch of these clouds floating around. Oh, that was good.
Yeah.
So tell me one major element of your creation, your process of creating, that's changed and one that stayed the same in the many years you've been creating.
Well, I think the love for collage has stayed the same, whether I'm working with images or working with ideas and settings. If I'm telling a straight on story, I've written fiction as well, and so those also seem very much operating under a kind of William Burroughs cut up technique, but in the mind. And so if I imagine, for instance, you know, and I'm not going to say this because it's a great idea. I haven't done it yet, and everyone's going to steal it. So I'll go on to it. But so I've only got like 5 or 6 really good ideas that I haven't really let out into the universe yet. Some are short stories and this and that. Um, but I think what hasn't changed is that idea of arresting attention, like Mark Lehner is a writer also who once said, "I want every sentence to blow your mind like an MTV." Which I guess was popular, at the time he said it, but that every sentence is like that. I'm not like into an every sentence kind of keeping you just totally shocked and surprised. But Terry used to often, my father, quote the Cocteau and Diaghilev discussion about étonnez-nous, astonish us, young man. This is the poet who has is that the young poet who's sort of asking the older poet in Paris at the cafe, like, what shall I do? And he just says, astonish us. So
Yeah.
I go, I'm really a believer in that, and I think that maybe in my blood as well, but certainly in the great art that I like. And we've mentioned so many people tonight today who said such and done such great things. But I think the astonishment, and Terry himself, my dad used to say, the greatest thing in writing is, the greatest capacity in writing is, the greatest thing in writing is the capacity to astonish and not shock. Shock is a worn out phrase, but so he certainly took that on. But I think I sort of got it through the ethers that's what is to strive for, and that's a really cool avenue to keep looking down. And I think people like we've mentioned, like whether it's Buñuel, Craig Baldwin, Bruce Conner, I mean, goodness, Pablo Ferro, they're all about like, it might be like blowing your mind every, the equivalent of every sentence, but it's that flow that just, in Terry's case, escalated. He was into escalation. Esquire magazine once said, there's no writer more capable of handling frenzy on a gigantic scale than frenzy on a gigantic scale. I like that. So I think it's the astonishment, really, that, and doing so, it could, I suppose, be at the very end where you realize, oh my God, the narrator was this all the time. That's astonishing. It's possible too. But as a more visually oriented person, I think it's the collage arrangement of images that are kind of arresting and certainly capture your attention and maybe don't make sense. That's not that important.
Astonish me. I love that Cocteau quote. That is really well. You put it in context well too. Now tell me something good you never had and you never want.
Well, I'm sure heroin is really good.
Dude, that's that's the 3 answers I get the most are fame, money, and heroin.
Cool. Well, I guess we've covered it then. Wow.
Yeah, that's good. Okay. If you were in a vat of vomit up to your neck and someone threw a bag of shit at your face, what would you do?
Well, I'd use the bag to make some sort of breathing device.
Oh my God, that's almost the like so I asked that question like 25 years ago to just some woman on the boardwalk in Venice, and she said, well, I'd use the bag to swoop myself out of the vat of vomit. And I said,
cool.
Well, that's Edgar Allan Poe's Descent to the Maelstrom. You watch patterns. And that was, you use it as a breathing device. That is brilliant. I've never had that answer. Thank you. So I'm going to ask one more and then we'll bring Clinton on. And this has been truly enlightening. And I hope we can go on forever and ever, Nile, because this was fun indeed.
It's great.
Joseph Boyce says, make the secrets productive. And Lou Welsh, great beat poet and ad man, said, guard the secrets, constantly reveal them. But it was Thornwilder in 28 said, art is confession. Art is the secret told, but art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time.
Mm.
Now, my question is not to insinuate you haven't done this. You've laid the cards out on the table with me amazingly for almost 2 hours. What's it really all about for you?
Well, for me now, it is laying the secrets out, but in a way where I guess they're masked in a way by the invisibility of an artistic creation that really flows and works and seems to hit all the right notes, and in a sense leaves the author as almost irrelevant. You know, the author, the speaker of these secrets, the revealer of these secrets that are true or that maybe are even escalated and, you know, in a sense as sort of fabulous telling or symbolic. In any case, that, you know, the great thing about those secrets is that's the real juicy stuff, and you want to go for the real juicy stuff that you've been tenuous about, and that you've been thinking, well, that's not really important, or no one could relate to that. Going to where it hurts, I guess you could say, too, and finding out why it is that it's so energetic and vibrant. And you don't just spill it all out at once on Oprah, um, but because that doesn't really do you, the former secret holder, any good. But I have the wonderful opportunity to reveal a lot of, yeah, they were big sort of secrets, actually. You know, my family didn't talk about breaking up or anything. I was also would have been too young to understand. Um, but, you know, I commented before about my father, Terry Southern, that he was not an introspective writer or one to, he kept a lot of secrets. I never knew who my grandparents were. It was as if he dropped from the sky without any family. He turned his back on Texas and never turned back for, you know, a number of reasons, which are all interesting to explore and kind of make up in a sense. But, you know, and he's told some things here and there. But you know, to be able to, I think, and my wife talks about it, kind of cleansing of the family line, you know, just through confession and through revelation and through with it, artistically, that there's great benefit to that. And I believe that too. And it's not like I'm taking down my father in some way. It's really more that it's okay to express yourself. And, you know, I could go on and on about my father and how interesting and instructive it was, sort of, you know, not to, well, even just that idea of not knowing or talking about his family. I think for me, it's a gentle unweaving of things that were formerly secret, and really diving into that place where the secrets can become your allies and become a thing of public, you know, demonstration almost, or oratory, or, you know, at best, a beautiful piece of art that is moving and that is also cathartic and purifying for me. So that's the idea, but there is resistance to it, and so I'm, you know, I like getting ready to, you know, find my way in without cutting. You know, you cut through without hitting the bone in a way, and there's some, you know, you can just time it just right and get in there. Well, I look forward to doing that.
Yeah, it's really, you summarize well what I've learned from Frank Zappa in my study with him is embrace contradiction. That
Yeah,
we can,
right.
we can embrace it. Clinton, join us, please. I know you've been there listening, and you always contribute with, you know, usually I, just to set it, I would like to do these in a public setting, and then I ask questions from the audience. And then when this audience thing stopped over the last year, I got lucky hooking up with Clinton because he indeed adds a question that I didn't think of or listens closely. He has this great capability of listening and then going, well, take it away, Clinton. You're on mute, dude.
While he's on mute, let me quickly just say how great it was speaking as you're passing the baton now. How great it was speaking with you. Such a joy, and like old friends all around in the room now that that you've evoked, and also going full circle. This radio station I mentioned just did a 3-hour tribute to Zappa during their fund drive. Some real great rarities, and so Zappa's definitely in the air.
Yeah, and indeed, I'm going to come back with a couple more, but thank you. That was nice. Go ahead, Clinton.
Terrific.
Wait, you're still on mute. Nope, you're still on mute. Really? all these young people and their knowledge of everything techie, and Clinton this never happens to Clinton. Just write it down, Clinton, and we'll read the question. But we still can't hear you. Yeah, no way. It's true.
Are you doing a sort of science experiment to observe me? You know, the mass observation movement, where you're going to introduce this to your questioning now to just see how your interviewee reacts.
This is what
okay.
Joan left. Okay, there he is. Thank you.
Yay.
Awesome. No, I love Jerry's interviews. Isn't like he's great because he always pulls out so much interesting stuff from his guests, and also interesting people like yourself. It's kind of like a peek behind my culture that I had no idea what was going on behind the scenes. So, for instance, of course, I've seen Barbarella and oh, I'm here, right? I got you.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay, good. And Doctor Strangelove and whatnot. So now I was like, oh, this is a fantastic opportunity because those two films. It's really funny. The first time I saw Barbarella, I immediately thought was, wow, there are some really profound, complex themes on like human, slow distancing and the introduction of machines coming between people and procedures and whatnot, as like, all of her various partners getting more and more abstracted away into weird. I'm like, this is a really complex. I never heard everyone who talks about the film thinks it's cheesy or whatnot, and I was intellectually intrigued the whole time. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's funny. It's funny. All right.
Yeah.
And then Doctor Strangelove. It's a very serious topic about very real stuff, which is turned into a dark comedy. What's the secret? To handling profound and serious issues like nuclear war with handling those with the grace necessary to make them even funny.
Right. Well, that's great. Terry, I think, had a natural funny instinct, and as he tells it, when he read Edgar Allan Poe for the first time as a young boy, that blew his mind in terms of Poe's using a journalistic kind of technique as if he's a credible source. But of course, the story he's telling is more and more and more escalatingly really incredible, astonishing even. And I think that early on produced the knowledge, especially when Terry started trying to do this in his own style. He rewrote Poe's narrative of A. Gordon Pym, which is a terrible story of cannibalism at sea, and becomes really gruesome and grisly. But it starts off like a very serious journalistic account, but then is clearly into the land of the macabre and the grotesque. So Terry early on had an affinity with grotesquerie and astonishment, and he was just naturally a very funny guy. I know to be true. But he was also very serious. And part of that, I think, came out of his experience in Paris in the late 40s, early 50s, where he was studying at the Sorbonne, and existentialism was, very dominant in the culture at the time. This idea that, coming out of the post-war, devastation, then this idea that man can, is the seeds of his own destruction as well, with the atom bomb and everything, and that really everyone is just responsible for their own actions at the end of the day. And as Sartre says, hell is other people. So that's like what you end up with is that, in a sense, the world's problems are always other people getting in the way or doing something wrong. That's like my shorthand of that. And that there's no exit, really. So it's a pretty dark point of view. So if you combine this funny, astonishment-oriented formalist, in a sense, he was a classicist, as John Cale might say, the trouble with classicists is, but Terry was a pretty unique one. But I think that clearly, like, there's an anecdote Terry used to say that Peter Fonda and Dennis Hopper wanted the motorcycle riders at the end, that Dennis said, well, why can't they just run into the sunset, ride off into the sunset? And, you look at all of Terry's films, they end in disaster and destruction, and even End of the Road, which is a really interesting film from 1968. It was released in 70, but they started filming just after Bobby Kennedy's assassination. It's a very dark kind of, but, engaging. And there's a lot in that film that's really wonderful, but that ends with the death of the main character through a botched abortion that you see. It's not graphic in any way. But Terry had he used to call it iron in the soul, quoting Celine, this capacity for enduring and sort of almost being one with the darkness of the human soul and kind of toughening up around it and creating some sort of art around it. So he always had, unlike a lot of his, contemporaries and also these younger people like Fonda Hopper, a very jaundiced view of the human capacity for redemption, really. But nevertheless, his stuff is really funny. So it seems that he knew, it's kind of like Voltaire was very humorous, and Terry was kind of emulating Voltaire in Candy, but that ultimately there's a jaundiced view towards human avarice and, aggrandizement and greed and all this stuff. So he definitely set himself up to take on, whether it's capitalism or psychology. Many of his books have just like scene after scene where he's taking a pin into the overinflated bubble of something that's being hyped or promoted. It might be like advertising or soap operas or whatever was the going thing of the day, putting a pin in it and then moving on to the next thing. So I think your question is great, and it's, as you see, my answer is probably overly complicated, but I was giving you specifics, and it's still an interesting conundrum with Terry. Is like, how did he look at his own life? Did he see it as a comedy or something else?
No, thank you. Your answer was very helpful.
Okay, cool.
Oh. Yeah,
Thank
we're
you.
print-oriented bastard POBs. We love it with all those lit references. And the beauty is when it comes down to it, Bob Dobbs says when you're laughing, you're learning. And Gurdjieff says laughter is the reconciliation of yes and no. So, what can you do but laugh? I mean, that's like the beautiful thing that humans can do is again, like Zappa says, I'm very serious about being not serious.
Yeah, that's right.
So a couple more, Nile, and it's been a pleasure and an honor. What's the healthiest cultural shift you see developing today?
I think an awareness of our past here in America and in other parts of the world, that a past that had previously been hidden, that's still unknown, really. You look at the Abraham Lincoln special that's on CNN right now. It's like, yeah, those photographs, maybe some of them have been seen before, but just this history of slavery in this country, the original sin of America, next to the wiping out of the Native Americans that is not yet addressed in the culture at all. I think that's a healthy impulse, and it's a healthy exercise, and more than that, it should prompt reconciliations and all kinds of things. And I think we're seeing these ideas that we never thought could be possible, really coming forward. But in terms of implementation, that's not so much the important thing as recognition, like the shock of recognition, which is also a Greek tragic, there's a term for it, and I believe it's peripetia. I speak Greek, my wife is Greek. Peripetia is the reversal. At some point there's a reversal. Recognition, some of your audience will know the Greek word for that. I forget, but it's a tenet of Greek tragic, we have to go through that catharsis, another Greek word. And that, I think, is more important than money or other things like that. And how we do that, I think, Obama had a moment where, he took us a little bit down that path, like a itty bitty step. But I think we've got a long way to go. But I think it's encouraging where these kinds of things have been coming up, and so that it's just inevitable they'll have to be worked through in some major and profound way. I look forward to seeing that.
That was great, and indeed, we'd love to have you back. Where another series Clinton and I do is called McLuhan Mashup, and it's basically Clinton and me the whole time, and you dialoguing on something like history would be great, or whatever, Don Terry, or
media ecology.
That's what it is, the media ecology soul session. So last question now, Nile, is what gives you the most optimism?
Well, clearly I'm, motivated to, say my kids do, because, they're young people starting out in life and have so much ahead of them. And I'm encouraged, and gives me both hope and optimism. And also for myself to become more balanced in my creative life. I imagine that's not easy for many artists today, to even call themselves an artist, and also just how to be in this world and be comfortable and be happy, be thrilled by what you're doing. So I look forward to finding that balance. I mean, I'm sure we all do. And I'm hoping that the film I'm making will certainly help do that. Other projects in the past have as well, and they've gone through their iterations. And it's, I look forward to a day maybe where it's really just, doing immediate, like these postcards I mentioned, comes so easily. So finding what it is that comes easily and provides great satisfaction, that's something I look forward to as well. Yeah.
Thank you so much. It's really been an honor and a pleasure. And I love the answer, kids, children, youth. It's really the answer I get often. What gives us most optimism? So thank God Clinton's younger than us, and he'll carry this on.
Absolutely.
He gets it. So thank you, Clinton, and thank you, Nile Southern. This has been an honor and a pleasure. Really appreciate it
so much. Thank you. Thank you, Clinton. This is wonderful. Again, maybe a live feed into the White House, just so that they got the translation going, that'll save you some labor too.
Well, yeah, Biden said James Joyce is his favorite poet. So
yes, there you go. Seamus Heaney, he quoted him as well. Hey,
yeah, that's right.
Hey, Seamus, of course, wrote the Marianne Faithfull song, right? Why'd you do it? Why'd you let him suck your cock?
Whoa!
I hope you don't put me in the dark.
It sounds like you can hook me up and we can interview her someday. So
yeah, cool.